Ancient stories tell of the origins of our cosmos, the hot, fiery earth turning against the changing sky. From the union of Papa, our earth mother, and Wakea, our sky father, comes everything in our world.
Night and you,
The sea and all its creatures,
and blue Hawaii.
the islands that we call Hawaii,
The night is heavenly,
the taro, our sustaining food,
and you are heaven to me.
and Kanaka the real people of this land.
Lovely you,
We are one with our earth,
blue Hawaii.
living, communicating, conscious.
With all this loveliness,
We cherish and care for the land,
be loved.
for it gives us life.
Come with me.
Keep Hawaiian lands in Hawaiian hands.
While the moon is on the sea,
We not can live on the streets. We don't have a house.
the night is young, and so are
What are you holding? You guys remind me of 1898.
are we.
Thank you, State of Hawaii. Thank you, Governor Ariyoshi.
Dreams come true in blue Hawaii.
This our land. This our way of life.
And mine could all come true this magic night of nights with
We are the Hawaiian people. These islands have always been our home. We were sovereign over this land before there was an England, long before there was a United States. By the 19th century, our independent nation was recognized by the dominant powers of the world. And in 1893, in an act of war, in an armed invasion, and in violation of international law, our nation was taken. And we have been compelled, against our right to self-determination, to become United States citizens.
We are not American! We are not American! We are not American! We will die as Hawaiians! We will never be Americans!
Hawaiian civilization was developed to a very high state because Hawaiians had to live in an island ecosystem and take care of it. They cultivated both dry land and wetland taro, and they literally farmed the seas with fish ponds. Sharing became a mark of civilized behavior because there was so much food available. If you live in a relatively small environment, you develop an economy of agriculture, an economy of fishing, an economy of sailing, of harvesting the uplands. You have no alternative. In order to feed a large population, you must economize.
Because the society was so well organized, people only had to put 4 hours a day into food production. They had a lot of leisure time, and some of the leisure time they used to create great works of art. The greatest chanting and hula that we see, wonderful surfing contests, wonderful feats of physical prowess.
Sleek, streamlined canoes with which Hawaiians made these long voyages from hemisphere to hemisphere.
I wouldn't want to say to you it was a perfect life, but it was one that we understood and that we enjoyed.
Into the relative bliss of ancient Hawaiian society comes the British. And when they enter Hawaii, the Hawaiians are astounded.
He kanaka keu keu. They are white men with loose skins, angular heads.
The British, for their part, see the Hawaiians and are also astounded.
These are certainly the most industrious people I ever saw. They have brought their agriculture to an incredible degree of perfection.
The utmost attention to cleanliness prevails.
They are fair and honest in all their intercourse.
So, when Captain Cook arrived in 1778 on his two ships, the Resolution and Discovery, he realized he had come upon a remarkably robust, healthy, and flourishing people.
These chiefs were men of strong and well-proportioned bodies, and of countenances remarkably pleasing.
And of course, Captain Cook was well aware that his men carried infectious diseases.
The diseases that the British left, tuberculosis, syphilis, gonorrhea, lasted for decades and visited upon the Hawaiian people, a scourge that they never recovered from.
The dead fell like dried kukui twigs tossed down by the wind. 100 were stricken in a day. Scarcely 1 out of 10 lived.
The effect on the population was collapse, not a population decline, but a population collapse. That collapse makes it impossible to reconcile your spiritual world or your political world or your economic world. Everything is chaotic.
All of these things have led to changes in the air which we breathe, the coming of things which weaken the body, changes in plant life, changes in religion, changes in the art of healing, and changes in the laws by which the land is governed.
Calvinists. Let's look at Calvinists a little bit. Of all the religions that came into the Pacific and all the missionaries that came, Calvinists were probably the worst. Coming out of New England, which is a very cold place where people have very severe attitudes towards one another, these Calvinists didn't like dancing in any form. They didn't like European dancing. They thought it was a terrible thing. They didn't allow dancing. They didn't celebrate Christmas. They didn't celebrate birthdays. They didn't celebrate any aspect of life. They were very somber.
The appearance of destitution, degradation, and barbarism among the chattering and almost naked savages was appalling. Can these be human beings?
Do they not form a link in creation, connecting man with the brute?
So their goal was to civilize us, to bring us out of barbarism and paganism up to a level of civilization as they saw it.
And they want to institute a New England way of living so that the women must sew, the printing presses must roll, and Hawaiians must sing hymns and recite scripture.
You must dress like foreigners do. You must eat what foreigners eat. You must farm the way foreigners farm. You must forget your dances and your traditions. In addition, the Calvinists said the reason you are dying is because you do not believe in Jehovah.
They enter this mass death scene, they bring an explanation, and they offer a form of salvation. The form of salvation is Oloho, everlasting life. So they convert because they believe it will guarantee everlasting life. Of course, it does not. The conversion numbers go up, but the population numbers continue to decline.
We build churches, labor day and night, but the land has become empty. The old villages lie silent in a tangle of bushes and vines, haunted by ghosts and horned owls, frequented by goats and bats.
It is impossible to estimate too highly the value and importance of the Sandwich Islands.
The islands lie in the course of the great trade between North America and Eastern Asia.
It would be highly injurious to our interests if they should be seized by Great Britain or France.
It is the key to the dominion of the American Pacific.
Official American policy in the 1840s reflected this move for taking Hawaii when the President of the United States, Tyler, enunciates the Tyler Doctrine. In essence, a Pacific version of the Monroe Doctrine. It was a message that the American president was sending to Britain and France, telling them, this is not your arena. We, the United States, have this arena. While the Americans are doing this, they're also continuing to dispossess and remove American Indians on the American continent. They're also continuing their genocidal campaigns against the Indian tribes. So this is a simultaneous grab for power. Americans are moving across the continent in North America as they are moving out into the Pacific.
Many more foreigners came to live in Hawaii as businessmen, and they were constantly pressuring the chiefs for private ownership of land. The chiefs resisted this idea because traditionally, land was like water or air to be used communally. But missionaries warned the chiefs that if Hawaiians did not own their land according to Western land tenure, then they would lose the land. This had been happening throughout the Pacific, as Britain and France took over Australia, New Zealand, and Tahiti. Finally, in 1848, the chiefs reluctantly agreed to the privatization of land, called the Mahele, or land division. For the first time, land could be bought and sold.
There are a great many foreigners arriving to take up lands, and soon all the lands will be acquired by them. If this be the Lord's will, it may not be ere long before I acquire some for myself.
The missionaries began to buy large tracts of land, leaving the church and becoming merchants. Some today are multinational corporations. And the Land Commission, run by missionaries, gave land awards to only 10% of the common people. These awards averaged 3 acres apiece.
In September 1848, an American warship brought the disease known as measles to Hilo, Hawaii. It spread and carried away about a third of the population.
As foreigners were allowed to own land, they came to make great sugar plantations, and great fortunes were being made.
These fellows do not think they have done much unless they make a yearly profit of 100%. If a native was stubborn and held on to his land, they would surround him with their plantations and squeeze him out.
And as the sugar factors, ex-missionaries, gathered more lands under their control, the question immediately arose as to a reciprocity treaty with the United States. The United States resisted this for a long time.
Certainly the sugar growers of the South did not want to have sugar from Hawaii competing with their own sugar.
So if they were going to give up their competitive edge, they wanted something. And that something was the Pearl River Lagoon, otherwise known as Pearl Harbor.
May 8, 1873. Secretary of War, Washington, D.C. Sir, in compliance with your confidential instructions, we have visited the Sandwich Islands and ascertained the defensive capabilities of their different ports. Pearl River Harbor would seem to have the necessary properties to be converted into a good harbor of refuge. It could be completely defended by inexpensive batteries. Its waters are deep enough for the largest vessels of war.
Once General Schofield and the American military began to think of Pearl Harbor as a place that they could call their own, the idea of annexation of Hawaii to America became much more interesting to the American Congress.
Hawaiians at that time were greatly upset by this.
There is a feeling of bitterness against these rude people who dwell upon our land and have high-handed ideas of giving away somebody else's property as if it was theirs. My blood boils with resentment against this insult.
Harper's Weekly, December 26, 1874. King David Kalakaua, who was now on a visit to this country, is a man of good education determined to preserve the independence of the islands over which he rules.
When Kalakaua went to Washington, D.C. to negotiate the Treaty of Reciprocity, he caused quite a stir because he was very gracious, handsome. He addressed the Congress.
Although well disposed toward Americans, Kalakaua was strongly opposed to the cession of Pearl Harbor to this country for use as a naval station.
The Reciprocity Treaty is signed, and immediately after that, sugar exports to the United States increase astronomically. The number of sugar plantations soar and increase the demand for labor. Immigrants flooded into Hawaii, and between 1877 and 1890, there is an increase of immigrants to 55,000 new immigrants, a 33% increase. At the same time, the native population, because of disease and dispossession, continues its downward decline.
It is a question of only a few generations before the Hawaiians will be only a memory.
I believe that if I shall make the main object of my reign the increase of the nation, there may be secured both the stability of the government and the national independence.
So Kalakaua's motto was Ho'olu Hui, that is, to increase, to invigorate, proliferate the Hawaiian people. Of course, he revived our chants, our dance, our hula, our religious practices, and our traditional medical practices.
A retrograde step of heathenism and a disgrace to the age.
Kalakaua believed that in order to maintain Hawaiian independence, Hawaii had to project a strong image abroad. And so Kalakaua spent a lot of his administration in the years that he was king really trying to project that image. He tried to sign an Asian Federation Treaty with the Emperor in Japan. He tried to sign a Polynesian Federation Treaty with Malietoa in Samoa. He did what he could to tell other people in the world that Hawaii was a force to be reckoned with.
The little kingdom occupies an honored position in the family of nations, having treaty relations with all the commercial nations of the earth, and being a member of the Universal Postal Union with a representative in the Congress at Geneva. The standard of intelligence among the native Hawaiians is higher than that in any other nation in the world, illiteracy being practically unknown.
By this time, many Hawaiians had learned the Hale system. They could understand and were educated in that system. By bringing them into the government, Kalakaua earned the wrath of the missionary gang.
It is best to speak plainly. It is not a question of race, but of fitness. Let the native qualify himself for high office.
It wasn't that the Haoles were afraid that their expertise was not needed. It was that they were afraid that their influence was on the wane.
I do solemnly promise upon my honor that I will keep secret the existence and purposes of this league to protect the white community of this kingdom.
The Hawaiian League is essentially a group of white Americans who want annexation, and they have a little thug subgroup called the Honolulu Rifles.
This organization came to number some 400 men, really the most disciplined and powerful armed force in Honolulu.
And they, together with Lauren Thurston, the most vociferous annexationist leader, decide that they are going to promulgate a new constitution and force it on Kalakaua, essentially at gunpoint. This constitution, which has come to be known by Hawaiians rightly so as the Bayonet Constitution, essentially, in one fell swoop, disenfranchises Hawaiians of political power.
This constitution allowed all foreigners the right to vote if they had money. And because of the property qualification for voting, it took power away from the common Hawaiian, who was generally landless, who was generally without money, who could not meet the property qualifications.
It was not enough that the Haole controlled the plantations. It was not enough that they were making more profit. It was not enough that they had most of the arable land in Hawaii. No, they wanted to have control of the legislature. And their whole push in this period of time was to replace democratic native voting with oligarchic white missionary dominance. Kalakaua becomes ill and he leaves for San Francisco and he dies there in 1891. His sister, Liliuokalani, has been named in the Constitution as his successor. Liliuokalani is, for Hawaiians today and for Hawaiians then, a wonderfully Hawaiian personage. She is, for example, a great musician. She is a composer. She has over 300 songs to her credit, including some of the most famous songs in Hawaiian culture, like Aloha Oe, which is really a love song. But she was also something of a feminist. She had proposed, for example, that there be a women's bank. She was very concerned to support destitute Native children. And she brings to bear on this problem of her people's dispossession politically all of the grace and all of the understanding of a chiefly woman who has been trained for politics.
When Liliuokalani came to power in 1891, almost the first thing that she did was to take a tour of the islands. And wherever she went, there were representatives from all walks of society, basically, who came to her and said, we need a new constitution.
Petitions poured in from every part of the islands for a new constitution. To have ignored so general a request, I must be deaf to the voice of the people, which tradition tells us is the voice of God.
Immediately then, as soon as she takes office, she asserts herself. She decides that she will take a stand for her people, she will inaugurate a new constitution, and therein lies the whole tale of the overthrow. Unfortunately for Liliuokalani, the U.S. minister to the kingdom at the time was John L. Stevens.
Americanize the islands, assume control of the crown lands, and the result soon will be a civilization which will make the islands like Southern California.
Basically, Stevens saw it almost as a holy mission to see Hawaii safely encircled by American arms.
The time is near when we must decide who shall hold these islands as a part of their national territory.
He believed very strongly that America needed the Hawaiian Islands in order to expand.
The Hawaiians looked upon him as an unschooled buffoon, not dangerous, but certainly very rude. This, of course, was really, in many ways, an error, because Stevens was very dangerous.
The monarchy now was only an impediment to good government.
He was the U.S. minister, an accredited U.S. minister to the Kingdom of Hawaii. His job was to carry on with the treaty agreements that had been made between the Kingdom of Hawaii and the government of America.
The Queen and her faction will have to yield. Otherwise, the entire overthrow of the monarchy could not be long delayed.
You're really looking at somebody who's just basically a spy. He was reporting back to a specific constituency in Washington. He was a close friend of James Blaine, who was the Secretary of State under the Harrison administration. They were operating their own agenda.
The golden hour is near at hand.
Part of the intimidation that the Hawaiian subjects were feeling was the constant presence of U.S. military.
When you get into the 1880s and 1890s, there's almost always an American warship in Hawaiian waters. They are rotated through. One will leave, another one takes its place.
As soon as the USS Boston is ready for sea, proceed to Honolulu and report to the Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Station.
The United States in the 1880s embarked on a shipbuilding program. It was part of the general naval arms buildup in the period. Look at the Boston, which was completed in 1887. This was a state-of-the-art battleship.
The main battery consists of two 8-inch central pivot high-powered guns mounted in echelon, and 6 6-inch high-powered guns mounted in broadside pivots, rapid-fire guns, revolving cannon,
This
Gatling
was
guns.
the kind of symbol of American power that was anchored in Honolulu Harbor when the Queen was overthrown.
Remain at Honolulu until further orders.
The fear that this lodged in the heart of Hawaiians, particularly in the sovereign, Lili'u, must have been tremendous. That was, I think, a real testament to her courage.
And what she basically had to contend with was the Annexation Club, a group of people who were involved in the sugar industry and related industries like banking or shipping, whose express purpose essentially is to rid the kingdom of monarchy, rid the kingdom of independence, and hand it over to the United States. One of the first things they did was they consulted with John Stevens.
It was common talk that plotting accompanied dining at the United States legation on Nu'uanu Street.
And John Stevens essentially told them,
should a revolutionary attempt be made, it would begin by the seizure of the police station, the royal palace, and the government buildings.
There's no question here about his intentions. He's basically coaching them along. John Stevens is intimately associated with the conspiracy to overthrow the Queen.
In 1892, the Annexation Club sends Lauren Thurston, the arch-annexationist, to Washington, D.C. to lobby for annexation with the Harrison presidency.
It may be necessary to secure the government by a coup d'etat against the common natives as well as against the Queen.
The President does not think he should see you, but he authorizes me to say to you that if conditions in Hawaii compel you people to act as you have indicated, you will find an exceedingly sympathetic administration here.
Should unexpected changes make it seem best for you to act immediately, everything possible to second your plans will be done at this end of the line.
It's 10 in the morning in the palace. The Queen has come to meet with her cabinet to tell them she is about to promulgate a new constitution.
There were thousands of Hawaiians who had come into the palace grounds to hear at last that they, the Hawaiian people of this nation, were going to control the government and not foreigners. Unfortunately, her cabinet ministers were afraid to sign the new constitution.
I was surprised when the cabinet informed me that they did not think it advisable for me to take such a step, that there was danger of an uprising. I told them I would not have taken such a step if they had not encouraged me.
So with a heavy heart, the Queen went to the balcony to tell her people that they had to wait a little while longer before they have a new constitution.
I have listened to the thousands of voices of my people that have come to me, and I am prepared to grant their request. I was ready and expected to proclaim the new Constitution today, but with deep regret, I have met with obstacles that prevent it.
Now, there are people, of course, in the crowd who are very upset and who shout out that there should not be this missionary gang in control.
And she said, no, we'll have patience, we will have peace, and we will wait for another time.
As far as the Hawaiians are concerned at that point, that's the end of it. But in the meanwhile,
It is a condition of anarchy, pure and simple. We cannot sit tamely by and be shorn of our liberties by a treacherous woman, as Samson was shorn of his strength.
I stated to the gathering that a committee of safety should be appointed to deal with the situation.
the Committee of Safety, or the Committee of 13 as they are called, is comprised of 9 foreigners, American and German, and 4 haole, or white citizens of the kingdom.
I move that it is the sense of this meeting that the solution of the present situation is annexation to the United States.
And their first concern at this meeting is military strategy. Lauren Thurston will continue to reassure the Committee of Safety that they have the absolute support of Minister Stevens. Charles Wilson is the Marshal of the Kingdom, and he very wisely sees the larger picture.
I ordered the saloons closed at 9:00 p.m., 2 hours and a half earlier than usual, in order to induce the usual Saturday night crowd to disperse to their homes and so keep the streets clear.
He's very concerned early on that there be no pretext at all for the United States to land troops. And he sends his specials, his intelligence agents, to observe the movements and actions of Thurston and the missionary gang.
As peace and quiet prevailed throughout the city, I could not understand why the Thurston faction should continue to hold meetings.
Such men, having no covenant with their own consciences, suspicious even of their own shadows, in power or out of power, are always a menace to the peace of the community.
Sunday morning, the Committee of Safety meets at William Castle's house, a sugar plantation owner and a descendant of missionaries. We need to remember that this is a Sunday morning when the Queen and other converted Hawaiians are at Christian services. And here are the sons of missionaries who had converted those Hawaiians, themselves plotting to overthrow the government of the Kingdom of Hawaii.
About 4 p.m., I saw posters being put up calling for a mass meeting on Monday afternoon and signed Committee of Safety.
While the missionary gang is meeting, the Queen's supporters are also meeting. And Wilson, who is really ahead of the game in this whole event, says,
I proposed that the ringleaders should be arrested at once on a charge of treason, and the island put under martial law till the arrests were effected.
Then the ministers come back and they say to Wilson, well, wait a minute, we have to be very careful.
Attorney General Peterson objected on the grounds that we must at all hazards avoid a conflict with the United States troops.
And Wilson says, no, in essence, let's call their bluff.
I doubt that Minister Stevens has the authority to declare war against a friendly nation. And furthermore, we are in a position to resist all the troops that can land. We can oppose them now with over 500 men, 2 Gatling guns, and a battery of artillery.
Fearing American reprisals, the cabinet refuses to give Marshal Wilson permission to act.
At 9 o'clock on Monday morning, the Committee of Safety continues its work. The committee is feeling so nervous that they put into writing what Stevens has already been told at least twice, that they want troops to be landed.
Sir, the Queen, accompanied by threats of violence and bloodshed, attempted to proclaim a new constitution. This conduct and action have created general alarm and terror. We are unable to protect ourselves and therefore pray for the protection of the United States forces. The Citizens Committee of Safety.
In view of the existing critical circumstances in Honolulu, I request you to land Marines and sailors from the ship under your command to secure the safety of American life and property.
Ship's logs. At 4:25, landed the battalion fully armed and equipped to protect the U.S. legation and consulate and the lives and property of American citizens and to assist in preserving public order. G. Wiltz, commanding USS Boston.
Now, the troops that are landed are in full preparation for the invasion.
We landed at Brewer's Wharf and marched up to the corner of Fort and Merchant Streets, and there left a Marine company to protect the American legation and consulate.
They are ready for an occupation. There's no mistake as to what they are doing.
There are 3 companies of Blue Jackets with Springfield rifles, 1 company of Blue Jackets with Gatling guns and artillery, and a company of Marines in full arms, having a total strength of 152 men and 11 officers.
At the time the men landed, the town was perfectly quiet. Business hours were about over, and men, women, and children were in the streets.
The rest of the battalion turned and marched down King Street in front of the palace, and as we passed, the Queen was standing on the balcony. We gave her the royal salute by drooping the colors and 4 ruffles on the drums.
They came marching into Honolulu, and everyone was quite surprised. Certainly the cabinet members were surprised because they had not requested that the troops be landed.
As the situation is one which does not call for interference on the part of the United States government, my colleagues and myself would most respectfully request of Your Excellency the authority upon which this action is taken.
And Stevens makes no real serious reply. He refuses, in fact, to tell them why the troops have been landed.
Afterwards, they were marched back to town and took up quarters for the night at the Aryan Hall, a building separated from the government building by a lane known as Mililani Street, about 20 feet wide, and not more than 200 yards directly in front of the Queen's palace.
Why had they landed when everything was at peace? I was told that it was for the safety of American citizens and the protection of their interests. Then why had they not gone to the residences, instead of drawing in line in front of the palace gates with guns pointed at us?
The pretext that the troops were landed to protect American lives and property was spurious and false. Both lives and property were as safe here as in Kennebec, Maine. When the troops found quarters, the populace dispersed, the most of them going to the band concert at the hotel, which was fully attended as it was a beautiful moonlight evening.
The city was patrolled as usual by the regular police force. I had a strong guard at the station house. At 11:30 p.m., a special officer reported to me that the conspirators were now recruiting at Clem's lodging house on Fort Street. I again proposed to Mr. Peterson to proclaim martial law in the morning and get out warrants for the arrest of the conspirators.
The Queen herself did not want any arrests to take place, especially after the American troops had been landed. She didn't want to give the Americans any kind of an excuse to use those troops to take over the government.
At 11 a.m., I was informed S.B. Dole had accepted as president of the provisional government. Instructions were given to the police to arrest all persons on the street found with arms and ammunition. At 2:15 p.m., I received information that the conspirators were holding a meeting in W.O. Smith's office and that they would make a move on the government house at 3 p.m.
I happened to go to the front window, and looking down, I saw 5 big Hawaiian policemen standing on the opposite sidewalk, looking over toward our place. We did not know what they intended doing. Anything might have happened. At that moment, a pistol shot was heard coming from Fort Street.
I was in Fort Street. I heard the pop of a gun. I went to the corner and was told a policeman had been shot.
And the noise resounded all through Honolulu town. Everyone rushed down to Fort Street to see what had happened.
A loaded wagon with arms from Hall & Sons was going to the armory. The policeman tried to stop it. The driver pulled out a pistol and shot the policeman.
The officer, whose name was Lealoha, was then sent to the Queen's Hospital.
I now saw Mr. Dole and a body of men coming up through Merchant Street towards the government building. I noticed that all the Boston officers had placed themselves in the proper positions, with their men ready to make a move. A few minutes after, Mr. Dole and party turned the corner of Palace Square and entered the government yard, thence to the main entrance to the building, where they stopped, and Mr. Cooper read the proclamation.
The Hawaiian monarchical system of government is hereby abrogated.
No one was watching him. There wasn't a crowd.
A provisional government is hereby established to exist until terms of union with the United States of America have been agreed upon.
No one knew. It was a very quiet thing.
The Queen's government was then in the possession of the barracks and the police station. The question was whether she should make opposition to the provisional government.
The household guard was in control of the royal palace, with a total armed force of 272 men.
I had 224 men under arms, and more men were coming in than I could find guns for. I propose to the cabinet to send our armed forces out from all quarters, surround them and shoot them down, as they were only a handful.
It had not entered our hearts to believe that these friends and allies from the United States would ever seize our nation by the throat and pass it over to an alien power.
The Hawaiian monarchy has been abrogated and a provisional government established. We hereby request that you will, on behalf of the United States of America, recognize it as the existing de facto government of the Hawaiian Islands.
I hereby recognize said provisional government as the de facto government of the Hawaiian Islands.
If we did not by force resist their final outrage, it was because we could not do so without striking at the military force of the United States. I, Liliuokalani, yield to the superior force of the United States of America until such time as the government of the United States shall undo the action of its representatives.
On the advice of the cabinet, I gave way and surrendered under the terms of the Queen's protest. About 7:15 p.m., I disarmed all the volunteers at the station house. Gentlemen, it is not because I thought that you would not stand and fight, but it was in the cause of humanity that I gave way, especially when it was pointed out to me that we would have to fight a great nation like the United States with her millions of men, and to do this would only cause the sacrifice of hundreds of valuable human lives, which this country cannot afford to lose. It is better, therefore, to give way and await patiently the time until our Queen's protests shall have been heard by that great and good nation, the American Republic, from which I have no doubt we will receive justice.
Sunday, February 5th, 1893. It is a gloomy day, and it rains, rains, rains. Do not feel like going to church. I never saw more unchristian-like set as these missionaries, and so uncharitable as to abuse me in the manner they do from the pulpit.
Immediately upon taking control, the provisional government instituted essentially martial law.
If any person owing allegiance to the provisional government adheres to its enemies, giving them aid and comfort, he is guilty of treason.
So, under penalty of imprisonment and perhaps death, Hawaiians are being told they cannot support the Queen.
You had all kinds of laws against sedition. Newspapers would be looked at and would be examined very critically for their content.
They force the police and the government workers to sign oaths of allegiance or to suffer loss of employment.
But the new government is not, by any means, secure.
The provisional government troops and administration suffered dissension after only 8 days, forcing a declaration of an American protectorate to save the new order.
Today at 9 a.m., in accordance with the request of Provisional Government of Hawaii, I have placed Government of Hawaii under the United States protection. The Hawaiian pear is now fully ripe, and this is the golden hour for the United States to pluck it.
Once the Queen had ceded her authority to the United States, the Claudine steamship set sail for San Francisco with 5 provisional government commissioners on board, carrying the message that Hawaii's ready to be annexed. The Queen's commissioners are denied passage. They have to wait some 2 weeks for a regular steamship. All the more reason why the commissioners, who are on their way with great speed to Washington, must get there, negotiate an annexation treaty with the Harrison administration, and get it ratified by the Senate. That, of course, was not to be. On March 4th, Benjamin Harrison leaves office, and Grover Cleveland, friend of the Queen, is inaugurated. 5 days later, he withdraws the annexation treaty from the Senate. And at the same time, Cleveland decides to send Georgia Congressman James Blunt to Hawaii to investigate.
On the 29th of March, I reached the city of Honolulu. I directed the removal of the flag of the United States from the government building and the return of the American troops to their vessels.
Hawaiians believed in the months following the overthrow that America would right the wrong.
Blunt continues to do his investigation, and after a long period of time, interviewing many, many dozens of people, he sends his dispatches to Washington, D.C.
Mr. Blunt states that while at Honolulu, he did not meet a single annexationist who expressed willingness to submit the question of annexation to a vote of the people.
Suppose the question of annexation was submitted to the people of these islands. What would be the result of the vote?
It would be overwhelmingly defeated.
We resent the presumption of being transferred like a flock of sheep, or bartered like a horde of savages. And we cannot believe that our friends of the great and just American nation could tolerate annexation by force, against the wishes of the majority of the population. For such an annexation would be an eternal dishonor.
Now, during this period, the Blunt Report is being excerpted in newspapers throughout the United States.
The government of Hawaii has been stolen and offered to the United States by the thieves. What is the duty of our government? Accept the stolen goods?
The provisional government then begins to dig in its heels and to say, we are now the only government here, and you Americans, you stay out of this. You are interfering in the internal affairs of our country.
Speaker, the House is not in order.
Back on the continent, Cleveland is undergoing a great attack in the Congress and the newspapers.
Never before now has an American executive undertaken in any part of the world to stamp out republicanism and to set up monarchy.
How would he like to have Washington City governed by the Negro population of the district?
Carried to its logical extreme, the president's contention would restore this continent to the Indians.
Executive Mansion, December 18, 1893. The provisional government owes its existence to an armed invasion by the United States. By an act of war, the government of a friendly and confiding people has been overthrown. A substantial wrong has thus been done, which we should endeavor to repair.
Kupa ama hope o ka aina Hiki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anu me ka pakaha Aole makoa e mina I ka puukala o ke aupuni Ua lava mako I ka pohaku I ka ai ka maha o ka aina Mahope mako o lili ulani Aloha ai ka pono ka aina Haina ia mai ana ka puana Ka po'e I aloha o ka aina Mile after mile of rich country went by as we gazed from the windows of the moving train, and all this vast extent of territory which we traversed belonged to the United States. And yet, this great and powerful nation must go across 2,000 miles of sea and take from the poor Hawaiians their little spots in the broad Pacific, must covet our islands of Hawaii.
The ex-queen is weak in everything except savagery.
A woman whose horrid, bloodthirsty character has shocked the civilized world.
Arbitrary tyrant, half savage.
The annexation of Hawaii was never really a sure thing in Congress. And on both sides of the argument, either for or against taking Hawaii, the argument was predominantly racist.
At the time, Hawaii was portrayed with Cuba and Puerto Rico, and sometimes the Philippines, as a little child being lectured to by the great white father, Uncle Sam.
This kind of claim toward a racial superiority in which Americans were going to be taking the lead to regenerate the planet, to make the planet fit to live in for Americans, is typical of the kind of argument that annexationists use to move Americans past their complacency, move them past the frontiers of California and Oregon and Washington and on to further conquests.
There is a debate going on in Congress, a very heated debate about the empire, whether the American empire will be hemispheric or whether it will be global.
The Hawaii Annexation Treaty lags in the Senate. The number of votes needed will not come forth. The advocates of the scheme are now preparing to resort to a joint resolution, which may be put through by a simple majority in each House of Congress. In other words, if Congress should strictly obey the Constitution, annexation could not take place.
For half a century, U.S. ministers to Hawaii have sent back dispatches saying this place is crucial to control of the Pacific. The strategic importance of Hawaii then to the United States nails down annexation in the Senate and in the House. After Hawaii was annexed, in short order, the United States took Wake, Guam, Samoa, the Philippines, and of course Puerto Rico. The closing of the 19th century and the dawning of the 20th century was really the dawning of the United States as a global military power. And the best example of that was the taking of the Hawaiian Islands.
Under such circumstances, annexation is not a change. It is a consummation. Its accomplishment has been merely a question of time.
A battalion of 319 men from the U.S. flagship Philadelphia and the USS Mohican were met at the boat landing and escorted to the grounds directly in front of the official platform. The signal was given, and a salute of 21 guns was fired in honor of the Hawaiian flag. The bands played the national anthem, Hawaii Ponui.
I could hear I know they cried. I could hear the Hawaiians crying and crying, crying, because they're going to lose their queen.
I now yield up to you, representing the government of the United States, the sovereignty and the public property of the Hawaiian Islands.
And under the waves of old glory, little Hawaii claims her part in the land of the free and the home of the brave.
And what has been the result of becoming a part of America? Our children were punished for speaking our native language, taught to be ashamed of our culture, our names, our skin. Our home became America's playground, their battleground, their 50th state, their real estate. And in our own homeland, we are the homeless, we are the poor, we have the shortest life expectancy, we are the uneducated, we fill the prisons. But after more than a century of dispossession, we are still here. Today we are discovering our history learning our language and asserting our right to the land and to self-determination. The time has come for us, the Kanaka Maoli, to once again take our place among the family of nations.
Production of this program was made possible by major funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the Native American Public Broadcasting Consortium.